In the overall scheme of capital in the energy business, though, VC is just tiny. I mean, the biggest sliver is really debt, project equity, and that's one of the real hurdles to energy storage. We'll talk about that. So just quickly, RockPort Capital, 2 seconds on us. We're really happy to be able to help sponsor this, to be involved. We've been around for about 10, 11 years, just focused on the energy sector, started in Boston, and that's where we've been based up until 2 years ago. So deep roots into MIT, deep roots also into Berkeley, a little lesser so here. So we're looking forward to working with the Energy Club ongoing. We figured it's so close to Sand Hill that people had it well covered, but now we're going to make a run for it, so we'll see. You know, some of our, when we think about investments in storage and storage in general, I mean, there's a whole value chain here, and there's a variety of different ecosystems. So we have investments in one of our investments was in a company that we exited, which had vanadium oxide batteries, which is sold to a medical device company. It's actually a very successful outcome spin-off of nanogram devices, so it's a materials play. We have an investment in a company that's actually working on battery management systems, so new ways to charge and discharge batteries that kind of play off existing chemistries. We've looked at various business models around storage, who pays for it, how do we actually finance this stuff, and things like that. So Ener1 is a current investment of ours as well. We've been hit a little hard lately, but nonetheless, lithium-ion, Sustainax, a compressed air energy storage, innovative technology there. So there are different plays in different parts of the value chain, but that just speaks to the diversity of the sector. But I think energy storage is definitely crucial. I think it's crucial for a number of different reasons. First of all, I think pumped hydro is kind of one of the unsung heroes of the modern grid. You don't really realize it's there. It's been there for a long time. It plays an important role. Companies like Exelon, PG&E has a lot of hydro capability that they deploy. It tends to be very, very profitable for those groups that have it. And the problem is they're not making any more of it. You know, with things like gravity power, the one with the tunneling, that's really interesting. Faces a number of issues of who's actually going to take the first step on something like that to actually get it deployed. But you've got all these other types of technologies which are just minuscule, very, very small. In the compressed air, similar to pumped hydro, conventional compressed air relies on caverns and salt caverns and domes and things like this underground to actually deploy. So, and then you've got just a smattering of little things that are largely either out of the money or just in some cases not particularly safe. But why is it important? I mean, I think we talked about renewables, and you could say that that's largely regulatory driven and that there's a demand for more renewables. But renewables are somewhat cheap if you look at wind. It's not totally dispatchable, but it's really a very cheap energy source. And as you look at incremental capacity and what might get added to the grid, coal and nuclear are pretty expensive, so natural gas is there. Natural gas is cheap. That is a barrier actually to storage, as someone else I think mentioned. But even at the edges of the grid, where renewables actually they do make sense, and they will increasingly make more sense over the coming years as an economic option. You know, competing on rooftops, closer to loads and such. So there will be more distribution of generation on the grid, one way or another, regardless of incentive. Second is that transmission is old, and it's hard to make new transmission and get rights of way, as someone mentioned. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, so people like Mulholland and Robert Moses in New York, they were kind of idolized as great visionaries of building infrastructure. You can see murals where I grew up in upstate New York, where you know Robert Moses, who did the hydro plant in Niagara Falls, really was kind of idolized at that time. But we're a long way from that. There's a lot of, not in my backyard. You wouldn't be able to do something like he did today. So, you know, as the infrastructure continues to age, we need other types of solutions to accommodate that. So I think that also bodes well for storage. You know, it's not a simple market, and this is something that I think a lot of people, it gets quoted a lot. It's from the government, so I'll tend to say I believe it. But largely, I mean, there are, as you mentioned, it's really hard to put a number on any of these things, but you can under certain circumstances. And this would just be a list of different areas where storage makes sense. And you can segment some of these applications by size. You can segment them by time of response that's actually required. You can segment them whether it's more of a power application or an energy application, meaning is it a kilowatt or kilowatt hour type application. And then you can kind of run some numbers on what that market might actually look like. And granted, these are assumptions, but there are cases where people can put very defined values on storage. Probably the highest cost of storage might be, say, New York City, where there's just a transmission choke point, and they have diesel generators that they truck around from site to site to actually serve as backup if they have to from different areas, and that's areas where storage has actually a very high value. This is another chart that I thought was kind of interesting, which speaks to some of the challenges. So this is also out of EPRI. I didn't cite the source here, but these blue bars are kind of where you need to go, and these error bars are kind of our best guess of where these different technologies stand today. And you can see that there's kind of a mismatch there, largely, except for some of these things, like I mentioned, transportable, transmission, and distribution with regulation. So this would be like a mobile battery unit that would go around in cities. I mean, there's a very high value for that, and we could do that. Things like lithium-ion would be suitable there. But you look at something like everybody talks about wind. That's a blue bar you can't even see. Because there's not a lot of you need to be pretty cheap to kind of make something like that work. But this just kind of illustrates a bit of the gap of where we are and where we need to go.
So the application that everyone talks about of buying low, selling high, that energy arbitrage is the least valuable one. It seems to be the one that gets the most press. It's not.
Yeah, but I think that's for bulk, generation side of the meter. That's probably one of the hardest hurdles there are. It costs about 4 cents or so kilowatt hour to generate wind. The PPAs are signed for 6 cents or so. Now, you could argue that with storage, you might get a higher PPA rate, but power purchase agreement, maybe we'll get into this. You need long-term power purchase agreements and contracts to actually generate, to justify the building of the project. But more closer, so take for example, behind the meter, so this would be an industrial or commercial location where they're paying retail rates. They base things in certain systems called demand charges. So they actually pay a tariff based on what their peak demand was at any given time in any given month. So their storage or load shifting would have a much higher value. A lot of time. More here.
All right. Craig, you're up.